Under different circumstances, we will be able to continue the discussion on Ukraine, but as far as we have a very frank panel here, we will start from the question that was expressed beforehand in many kitchens in Ukraine, and there has been some very neurotic anxiety given the fact that Donald Trump has prevailed in the American presidential election. What to expect from it? And how Ukraine is getting ready for it. Is it prepared? Thank you for this question. I think that everyone's attention has been drawn by the presidential election in the United States. Donald Trump is a very strong manager. Undoubtedly, we understand that we have bipartisan support, bicameral support in the United States, and the result of the presidential election and the Congress election, and we talked about it beforehand, they gave us optimism as regards the continuation of support from America, and the Republican Party continues its support for Ukraine, and moreover, the American society supports us. Very positive conversations have taken place between presidents of our countries back in September. Just tonight, our president had a very good conversation with President-elect Trump, which he highly praised. And all these things prove that we can very careful, very restrained optimism as regards the future course of events and as regards the future actions on the part of our key partner, the United States of America. We, of course, understand that the key value of the United States is the defense of democracy and democratic values. It remains unchanged irrespective of elections. And I'm sure, personally, that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, President-elect, and the Congress of the United States, just like the American society, will continue their support for Ukraine. Moreover, I think that we will see very swift and very concrete steps on the part of our partners. We expect it. This is my estimation. But generally, do you think that in 2024, Ukraine was better prepared for Trump's victory than in 2016? I'm confident that we are ready to continue our cooperation with the US. And let me repeat, the presidents have very good personal contact. We have far better connections with the Congress now. And let me note that for the most part, today's congressmen and congresswomen in the United States support Ukraine. So after this election, we have optimism and we have reason to hope that our cooperation will revive and will be bolstered. We will work for it. We need to exert effort because nothing happens by itself. To ensure that we have these diplomatic financial victories, we need to continue to exert effort, and we are ready. We are committed to do it. The law on increasing taxes was recently adopted by the Verkhovna Rada. In spite of many reservations, I saw people visiting our TV channel, and they said that this is not exactly fine that people who pay taxes before have to pay even more. So what to expect now? Because people need to invest even more and need to pay more taxes, but they also count on the rule of law in Ukraine. I thank Ukrainian businesses and international businesses that despite the war has stayed in Ukraine, continues to work and pays taxes to the budget. I thank each and every one of you for this tremendous work. Let me emphasize that over 2.5 years of the war, we have not raised taxes, and we even introduced some preferential arrangements for businesses to operate simpler, to survive this initial shock of the full-scale invasion. Today, we have reached the inflection point when it is extremely vital to pay more wages, salaries to our servicemen in the army. You know that mobilization continues. 250,000 people have been conscripted in addition to the number of the armed forces that we had 2.5 years ago. And they need to be provided for with all kinds of services, and this is the responsibility that rests on our shoulders. Partners are helping us, they finance our budget, but only in respect to non-military expenditures, which means that all the social expenditures are financed from the budget, and all the funds collected in Ukraine finance the defense needs of Ukraine. So the military tax that has been supported by the parliament will be entirely directed to paying salaries to the armed forces members and to members of the security bodies as a whole. It's extremely important. Besides taxes, to mention that the government and the National Bank is looking for other ways to find new ways to attract funding by cooperating with international investors that provides their capital by buying Ukrainian bonds. Funds are also provided thanks to savings and thanks to attracting external sources by restructuring Ukraine's debt. That is the work completed by the Ministry of Finance. And we also need to find internal resources by increasing the military tax. Of course, there are other taxes that were added by the Verkhovna Rada during the vote. But the main part of the funding introduced by this law is the military tax for providing salaries to our servicemen. Let me clarify, in your speech you mentioned about Ukraine's funding through frozen Russian assets. Can you please provide us with the number of the funding that Ukraine is expecting to receive to its economy? At the moment, we know that the total funding stands at around $300 billion of frozen assets in various countries on their accounts, on accounts of various organizations and companies. We have agreed with international partners that the first step before the complete confiscation of assets, and this is our main goal, is to use the revenues from the frozen Russian assets. We've also agreed that the revenues accumulated through the usage of these frozen funds over the next 10 years will be accumulated by the G7 countries. We have had a memorandum to that effect. So that is $50 billion that we are discussing. Those revenues will be provided to Ukraine as an advance payment, as a loan that Ukraine will not repay. That has been agreed with the IMF as part of our program to not increase Ukraine's state debt, sovereign debt, because this part of the debt will be repaid thanks to revenues from the frozen Russian assets. This is a legal instrument, lawful instrument. Work has been done in cooperation with the World Bank, the European Commission. With the World Bank, we have instituted a fund to which $20 billion will be paid. The European Commission has created a special macrofinancial instrument amounting to 18 billion euros. We're also working with Canada, Japan, as regards to their contributions, but until the end of this year, these funds will be under control of Ukraine. We are working with the IMF. We are directing these funds already for 2025, 26, and 27 to ensure that we have this safety net and not to spend all this funding in one go. We are going to use it to cover the budget deficit. Also, second direction is that these funds will give us an opportunity to infuse finance into military-industrial complex. And this funding will also enable us to work with the IMF program and continue it for the years to come. You just mentioned that the ultimate goal is to confiscate Russian assets. In your opinion, the resolution of this question is political in nature? For instance, it is related to the ending of the war, or is it of different nature? Because other countries are restrained in terms of banking issues that may arise in this regard. So, how do you treat this question? This is definitely political, diplomatic, and legal in nature. It is difficult for partners to take this unprecedented decision. In recent history, there has been no precedent when sovereign assets were confiscated by other countries. But we have prepared all the necessary juridical infrastructure. We have created a registry of assets, a commission. We are moving on, and these instruments have been partly put in place. In legal respects, the precedent of full-scale invasion of one country against another provides us with a chance to discuss the full confiscation of sovereign assets as a compensation for all the damage and destruction. So our key task, we understand that $465 billion is the estimation of the international authorities in terms of the damage that Ukraine has suffered. This is only part of what we need, Ukraine's going to need after the war ends. And in this respect, even $300 billion is not sufficient. We understand that political, diplomatic, and legal pressure in cooperation with our partners need to be directed not only to confiscate all the assets, but also to find additional sources, which Russia has to provide to Ukraine as a compensation for the damage. So we are going to work in all these three areas, political, diplomatic, and legal. We see the clear path, and this first step of $50 billion from revenues from frozen assets, this is the kind of icebreaker that will enable us to move on. The first precedents in Canada, in the United States, when private Russian assets were confiscated, and the legal framework adopted in certain partners provides us with very concrete hope that we will be able to attain this goal, and Russia, as an aggressor, will pay for whatever they have done in Ukraine. Your government recently announced the introduction of a principle, be at war or pay or work. So what are the main principles of it? How do you see it? And when do you expect it to start working? What has to be done? This is related to mobilization and reservation from it, which I partly discussed. I can assure you that mobilization and the summons to enlistment officers, 97% of them are going through the Oberik register. We see all the military obliged citizens, 97% of summons are sent to people who are not paying taxes and who are not registered on the labor market. So today, the priority in terms of mobilization is given to people who are not employed. Accordingly, the basis of this principle has been put in place. Only 2% of summons were sent over the last 2 months to people who are working. This is, of course, a large quantity still. Many people are still avoiding conscription, their obligation to defend the country, but still this work is going on. As I have stated, we are conducting an audit of critical enterprises. Unfortunately, the parameters existing now have enabled to institute some kind of fraud in this practice. We are now conducting an audit, and it is expected to be completed until the 15th of November this year. And we are going to institute very clear, very transparent, very concrete rules, very objective rules for reservation. They are not going to change drastically the decree that is now in effect, but they will enable us to determine more exactly the critical nature of enterprises. Two clarifications here. When you say that you are verifying people who are in the labor market or not, and whether it is automatic or through the Oberich system. How do you do it? And when you say that the person is paying taxes, do you mean that you're talking about individual enterprises or other workers? So what kind of employment is enough to consider the person that she's employed? As of now, state registers allow us to see whether the person is paying even a single hryvnia of taxes, irrespective of their form of employment. It doesn't matter. If the person is not paying taxes, it means that the person is not employed, at least officially. As a result, we can see that in state registers, Oberich displays this information, and we can see that the person is employed or not. And these people, unemployed people, are a priority for conscription. That is a very simple principle, and I think that is clear to everyone present in the hall, and it is clear to the Ukrainian people. For the next year, there are no funding for the recovery fund. What does it mean? What to expect for business and society? A recovery fund, let me remind you, was created and filled thanks to the confiscation of Russian assets that are now in Ukraine, and partly thanks to the revenues of the National Bank in 2023. The amount of this funding is 62 billion hryvnias, which is a quite powerful sum of money. It was practically used entirely thanks to the e-recovery program, certificates for housing, for repairs of housing, and for the purchase of housing. Secondly, it was used for the recovery of energy infrastructure and the water infrastructure in the south of Ukraine after the damage sustained by the Kakhovka Dam. And for the most part, the funding has been used, the projects have been implemented, and now we are moving on to using the funding in part from the frozen Russian assets, and this sum is expected to help us finance all the next recovery programs. They are going to be financed from other programs of the budget, and we will institute a relevant principle. Today we have projects for 256 billion hryvnias to compensate people for the lost housing. All those projects have been united under a common framework. We have introduced a principle single project pipeline. All the projects that have been prepared for funding will be financed in 2025, in particular, thanks to revenues obtained from confiscating Russian assets. This will be enough to cover all the recovery needs, and we do not need to create any other fund. With partners, we have created this instrument to see all the funding that is infused. Today, a huge sum of money from $7 to $9 billion is provided directly by partners to Ukrainian communities, by businesses. So all these projects are included into this single pipeline network. It is very transparent, and there you can see all the recovery projects which are going to be funded from the budget. They will be co-financed by the communities, their budgets, and even perhaps from the funding of benefactors. So we are going to use the DREAM system also, which is a software product which is already put in place. We are implementing this single pipeline principle. So today we understand that the e-recovery program is going to continue, but the resources of funding are going to be different. All right. Yeah, absolutely. I can assure you that e-recovery is moving on. It will continue next year even more actively because we know that the confiscated assets are a key source of compensation for the damage. So we are going to fund all the projects for recovery that the state is responsible.
So how about a sell then of Zelensky, where the money will come from? Attention. I know you like that question. It's a winter support draft project. We're not speaking about a southern hryvnia, which we're going to pay. It's a comprehensive winter support package for Ukrainian citizens. No one has doubt that the winter is going to be an easy one, even if terror will not continue. There are too many internally displaced persons in Ukraine living close to the front line, and they have a need in a respective support. Accordingly, this winter support package would include more than 20 different activities, among others, the possibility to request through DIA to the nation and receive 1,000 hryvnia of a respective social support payment. The way the money may be used for to support military, to support defense forces, to support energy, pay utility bills, electricity, gas, to support Ukrainian business. So to pay for goods and services of Ukrainian manufacturers and to items to be purchased deliberately, medicine and books. So the family of four with two adults would receive 4,000 hryvnia. So that probably to an extent could be equal or more than electricity bill, depending on the winter. So that was an idea to support those families who need that. In order to receive that 1,000, you have to request that. You have to tick the box that you need 1,000 hryvnia. Where to use this money, that would be a different issue. We also recognize and fix the subsidy payments for the people, despite the fact if the electricity bill is going to be smaller because of blackouts or power cuts, the person still will receive a sufficient amount of subsidies as been paid last year. Besides, we will provide more support activities for the families, separated families, for newly born kids, for pensioners, for kids, to support medicine procurement. And that is not going to be the business, Ukrainian business money. That would be our partners' funds. 22 euros per person for a difficult winter. That's not a significant amount of money. And partners with no any restrictions, IMF, other partners were supportive and they are happy to allocate this money, and we are going to receive this money from partners as a support to national budget. And these are the support projects for Ukrainians. These are not taxes from Ukrainian business. This is a critical moment to be publicly discussed. Thank you for that question. So we're happy to take a few questions from the room. Two questions. Please be the first one. There is a mic. Thank you, Viktor Galasyuk, Academy of KIEF. Thank you for your speech, dear Prime Minister. Based on new geopolitical realities and trends being deployed in economy, and on the other hand, based on real Ukrainian capabilities and resources, which two, three industries can you recognize that have a perspective which either absent in Ukraine or underdeveloped, and you would be happy to support them on behalf of the government to win the global competition? Let me say that the industry that has perspective and is available in Ukraine, that defense industrial complex, defense manufacturers, we do stress that we fund our own production. Next year budget has allocations for arms and ammunition acquisition, 750 billion hryvnia, and these are to be the contracts with Ukrainian companies. Only in the case when a particular piece of equipment or item is not produced in Ukraine, that is going to be purchased based on international contracts. That is the primary priority, the first priority that we would like to see in Ukraine, the full circle of arms and equipment production. For nowadays, there is a lack of combat chemistry production, so powders, TNT, explosive items. Well, there is an industrial one, but not the military one, and other elements of that complete circle of self-sustained production of defense needs, arms and ammunition. The other direction is more than a bit more global. That's a processing. Taking the agricultural sector, we export a lot of raw materials, but we would like to have more processing cycles introduced in Ukraine, and I'm grateful to those businesses who, despite of the war, provides more of processing circles and industries providing additional value within the state. And that covers all the branches, not only the agricultural, that's extraction branch and other directions. So such a parameter. Then additional stress, small and middle business. In any state with a market economy, small and middle business is a backbone of economy. And that is something that provides sustainability of economy in any state under any stresses, because when there are much more little bricks, the construction is much more stable. And same refers to small and middle business. That's why we pay that much attention to create that social national layer of a small and mid business. We allocate grants despite the war and despite the difficulties to the budget and to the partners. We provide the bonus loans. We stimulate the foundation of a small and mid businesses. We stipulate people to be self-employed, to have little family businesses. So that would be the backbone of our economy. That probably could be the third priority from the governmental priority, parliamentary support. Dear friends, one more question, please. Dear Prime Minister Igor Lysky, I'm a representative of industrial business. We continue build factories and plants, whether it sounds crazy today. And one of these projects is a big glass production factory. We currently import 100% of glass. So based on that example, we would like to identify two main challenges. The first one, you absolutely correctly mentioned the exemption from military service. So we have to allocate 100 staff members to be exempted, and an advice or maybe request so that would not only be identified by bureaucrats, the criteria, but there should be an economic mechanism available. Maybe it sounds a bit unjust, but forgive us, the war is very unjust by its nature. We have to restrain, we have to withstand, and we have to be productive and efficient in our manufacturing companies. And we have to book our best employers to be more effective for the state because of the taxes, maybe because of economic exemption. And the other challenge, that's a project funding. You're aware that the glass factory is 250 billion euros almost, and to make it happen based on equity or export funding from European programs is almost impossible. Is there a possibility to ensure, due to Ukrainian or special programs for project funding for such a priority projects? Thank you. Thank you. The key word and definition, justice for Ukrainian society. Thank you for recalling that. Thank you for placing that at the foundation of our dialogue. I am absolutely clear with the importance of exemption of the key specialists, the need to exempt the required number of people for economy to withstand. So rare, the logistics would be able to withstand. So we are in a dialogue, and Yulia Anatolievna, first Vice Prime Minister, has joined us, and she will keep her eye in terms of intensity of this dialogue when we stay between the militaries who need people for rotations, who are in a far extreme conditions today, and it's obvious there are losses, there are injuries, and the priority is the front line. That goes without any saying. They have to feel, first of all, the justice in this war. So we listen to the militaries, first of all, and we hear them very well. Of course, we talk a lot with business. We talk to many present here, and we look for a balanced option. It's very easy and simple to introduce the economic exemption, but it is not very well received psychologically among the warriors in the front line. And it's difficult to explain why someone speaking about the economic exemption or paying certain amount of taxes, it's unjust. Military would not see that as just effort. So criteria should be sort of satisfying both defenders and business and specialists, and that's a challenging dilemma. But please believe we are working on that daily. We have lots of different options. We test that, we pilot those, we try to harmonize that between all the stakeholders of the discussion. And following that, the audit, the inventory review, we will get to solution. Just maybe to update the acting decree and specify criteria more clearly. Just to give you an example where we are, and maybe Yulia in her blog will provide more details on your questions. So in part of salaries, it's not an average in the region, but we would place a very specific figure, the minimum, based upon which the people could be exempted, plus any other parameters that would not allow the fluctuation, because these fluctuations had caused the abnormal number of exemptions. And when we conducted the few audits, the first audits, we saw that people were exempt who pay salaries or who pay taxes from salaries less than the minimum, those who have not updated their military registration data. So the criteria being highlighted. And speaking about justice, each and everyone has to be in the same environment, and we have to ensure that equal environment for all. Sorry for taking that much time. That's quite a challenging issue for discussion. And what was the second question? Oh, project funding. Super important approach. We are advancing to that in terms of the national budget, in particular for the defense industrial complex. My first task to respective officials, Ministry of Economy, Strategic Industries Ministry, to find the legislative approach to the project funding for several years in a row. 5 years in the mid perspective and 10 years for long perspective. You can't implement the manufacturing program of long-range missile within one budgetary year. You have to be safe and you have to assure manufacturers for a long-term perspective, 5 years mid-term perspective and 10 years long-term perspective with a specific commitments from the budget. We are discussing that and we're trying to overcome that stereotype of single-year budgetary funding. From the project funding standpoint in the real sector in business, I do support your question in terms of that there is a current need for Ukraine, how government can affect on these issues. Industrial parks plus that law on invest nurses allows us to ensure, and we already allocated funding for this year and upcoming year to reimburse those investments that undertake place within the state. From the standpoint of big business, there should be investments starting from $12 million. We provide small grants and credits, 5, 7, 10 years. So that's more rather the question to the banking sphere, whether banks are ready, and there are many bank owners and CEOs present today, are they ready to consider the project funding as the development foundation? I'm sure right after the victory, when the risk level would be decreased for the state, for the loaners, I'm sure that the project funding would be reflected. But I do agree with you that today, under the war going on, that's a big priority and a big need. And based on the government platform, if we can legislatively assist to introduce such approach, we are happy to do so. We speak a lot with the head of the National Bank. He hears that. And recently, and we met a week before, and we met with the state-owned banks, with the officials from National Bank of Ukraine, looking for the ways how to support and help Ukrainian business through the long-term project funding in particular. Dear Denise, thank you. Dear Prime Minister, thank you for participating in our forum. Thank you.